After my son's funeral, his wife showed up with another man. The first time I saw him was at my son's funeral. Rain slid down the black umbrellas like quiet tears. The cemetery smelled of wet soil and lilies. Too many lilies. I hated that smell. I stood beside the coffin, my hands folded, my spine straight. Grief is strange. People expect screaming, collapse, drama. But when the pain is deep enough, it freezes. And mine had turned to ice. The priest finished speaking. The final prayers dissolved into the wind. One by one, people began leaving. Then I saw her. My daughter-in-law, Lena. She wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, tall, younger than my son had been. His hand rested lightly against the small of her back. Not the way strangers touch, the way lovers do. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. They walked closer to the grave. She leaned into him slightly, whispering something that made him smirk. Smirk. At my son's funeral, I watched them the way a man watches a storm forming on the horizon, quietly, carefully. The man placed his arm around her shoulders. She didn't resist. My son had been dead for 3 days. 3. When she finally noticed me staring, Lena's expression flickered. Just for a second. Then she smiled. A thin smile, cold, not grief, relief. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Grief didn't disappear. It hardened, like steel cooling in water. I buried my son that afternoon, but something else was buried with him. Trust. The house felt wrong after the funeral. Too quiet. My son Daniel used to fill every room with noise. His laugh had weight, presence. Now there was only silence. And questions. Lena didn't stay long after the burial. She left with the same man who had stood beside her. I watched from the window as their car disappeared down the road. No hesitation. No tears. That night I sat in Daniel's study. His desk still smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. The computer monitor reflected my face back at me, older than I remembered. I opened the drawer where he kept his documents. Insurance papers, mortgage records, business files. Then I found something strange. A small envelope, unsealed. Inside was a printed photograph. Lena, and the same man from the funeral. They were standing outside a restaurant. Close, too close. The timestamp in the corner burned into my mind. 6 months ago. Daniel had still been alive. My fingers tightened around the photo. I looked at the back. A single line was written in my son's handwriting. If anything happens to me, look deeper. My throat dried. Something inside my chest whispered a quiet, terrifying possibility. Accident. That's what the police called it. Daniel's car had gone off the road late at night. Brake failure. Instant death. Simple. Clean. But suddenly, it didn't feel simple anymore. I leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. 6 months. That photo had been taken 6 months ago, which meant one thing. The affair didn't start after Daniel died. It started while he was alive, and my son had known. I didn't confront Lena. Not yet. Anger is loud, reckless. Truth requires patience. So I stayed quiet. The next morning, I called Daniel's lawyer. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. Lena would be there. Good. I needed time. First, I visited Daniel's mechanic, a tired man named Harris, who had serviced Daniel's car for years. He remembered the accident. Strange thing, he told me while wiping grease from his hands. The brakes weren't just worn. The line had been cut. My heartbeat slowed. Cut? I asked. Clean slice. Like someone used a tool. The police report had said mechanical failure. But mechanics know the difference. Someone had tampered with my son's car. I thanked him and left. Next, I hired a private investigator, a quiet woman named Marla. Professional, efficient. 3 days later, she brought me a folder. Inside were photographs. Hotel entrances, parking garages, restaurants, Lena and the same man, over and over again. His name was Victor Hale, a real estate broker. And according to the timeline, the affair had been going on for almost a year. My stomach twisted, but the worst page was the last one. A bank transfer record. Large amounts of money had been moved from Daniel's business account to an offshore account, authorized by Lena, just 2 weeks before the accident. I sat in silence as the evidence spread across the table. Affair, money, sabotaged brakes. The storm on the horizon had arrived, but I still didn't move, because revenge, real revenge, is never rushed. The will reading was tomorrow, and Lena thought she had already won. The lawyer's office was bright. Too bright. Lena sat across the table wearing black. But it wasn't morning black. It was fashionable black. Victor sat beside her. His hand rested casually on her knee beneath the table. They didn't even try to hide it. When I entered the room, Lena rolled her eyes slightly. "Mr. Carter," she said flatly. No warmth, no respect, just irritation. The attorney cleared his throat and opened the file. "My condolences for your loss." Then he began reading Daniel's will. Most of the estate, his house, investments, business shares, had been left to Lena. Exactly what she expected, exactly what she wanted. She leaned back, satisfied. Victor squeezed her knee. Then she looked at me and smirked. "You have no legal standing here, old man." The words landed softly, but they carried poison. I said nothing. The lawyer turned another page, then paused. His expression changed. "Oh," he said quietly. "There is a second document." Lena frowned. "What second document?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "This was filed separately. It appears Mr. Daniel Carter submitted, weeks before his death." The room went still. My pulse slowed. The lawyer began reading. "This document activates in the event of my death under suspicious circumstances." Lena's smile vanished. Victor sat up straighter. The lawyer continued. "My father, Richard Carter, is appointed executor of my estate. If evidence of marital infidelity or financial fraud is discovered, my wife forfeits all inheritance." Lena's face drained of color. The lawyer lifted the final page. "Additionally, all financial transfers linked to Lena Carter will be investigated under criminal fraud statutes." Silence filled the room. Heavy, crushing. Then Lena grabbed the edge of the table. Her hands were shaking. Victor stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, but his voice lacked confidence. I leaned forward slowly. For the first time I spoke. Calm, quiet. My son wasn't a fool. Lena stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You planned everything," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "My son did." I slid the folder across the table. Photographs, bank records, the mechanic's report. Victor's face went pale as he flipped through the pages. "You sabotaged the brakes," I said. Not loud, not angry, just a statement. Lena's breathing became uneven. "You have no proof," she whispered. I smiled slightly. "The police will decide that." The lawyer cleared his throat again. "There is one final clause." Lena looked up slowly. "If Lena Carter contests the will," he read, "all evidence gathered by my father will be released to law enforcement." Victor stepped away from her, literally stepped back, like she was contagious. Lena's composure shattered. "You set me up," she screamed. I shook my head. "No. My son protected himself." Then I stood. The room felt colder. "You buried him," I continued quietly. "But he was smarter than you." Lena collapsed back into the chair. Victor walked toward the door. Already leaving. Already abandoning her. And for the first time since the funeral, she looked afraid. The sun was setting when I left the building. The sky burned orange behind the city skyline. I stood on the steps for a moment, breathing slowly. My son had known. He had seen the betrayal growing around him like rot inside a wall. And instead of shouting, he planned. Quietly, carefully, just like I taught him. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it lets the guilty destroy themselves. My phone buzzed. A message from the investigator. "Police have opened a case." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Lena would lose everything. Her money. Her reputation. Her freedom. But none of that would bring Daniel back. Some wounds don't close. They simply stop bleeding. I looked at the sky one last time. Then I turned and walked down the steps. Because grief had changed me, hardened me, and the truth was finally clear. My son didn't lose. He just made sure the right people lost with him.